So what the session is all about, right? Every single challenge, like I mentioned, before we start off, before we get all the submissions, because we usually get 1 or 2 submissions prior to this, but the main idea about this session is to talk about the data set, to showcase some of the things and tips and tricks that me and Federico, for example, think could be useful for you. There are some things that I'm, for example, also going to tell you about today. I'm not going to showcase you how to do it because I want you to figure it out. It's one part of the challenge, trying to figure things out. And trust me, we've all been there. Nothing comes easy. It's the way it is. But I'm going to give you a few ideas and insights on what I think could be an interesting approach on how to tackle these sort of challenges. But yeah, we're going to talk about the challenge dataset itself. We're going to give you some interesting ideas, what we know from our experience and so forth. And we're going to talk about some of the ZoomCharts visuals, showcase you how you can utilize them for these sort of reports and everything. And of course, I'm going to answer all your questions, or at least try to. If there's going to be a lot of them, we're going to try to answer all of them. But, you know, time is time. And so far, me and Federico always try kind of go always over the time a little bit. So we're trying.
Everybody knows Sabine. She's in the chat. She will actually tell us that we went over the time, and discount, I think it's like €1, €2 per minute we overstep the timeline. So every month my salary is a bit shorter because of that. So please.
It's going to tell us how many beers we over this month.
Yeah. There you go.
All right, guys. Federico, you want to start off?
Sure. Let me try to share. I'm terrible sharing. I think everybody knows me. For those that doesn't know me, it's the first time in the webinar. My name is Federico Pastor. I'm the co-founder of FP20 Analytics, a challenges data analysis, challenging community group for people to practice and try to improve their skill in data analysis. I am here. Let me see if I can. Yes, it's coming.
We'll get there eventually, guys. Don't worry. There's always going to be some technical challenges.
Okay, you got it there?
We got it. We see it. Perfect.
Okay, the data set is very simple. I don't know why I cannot get the Power BI there. It is open in my screen. The data set is very, very simple. It's very, very clean. There is only a couple of few funny characters, I think, in some of the description. We can see there, but I will not bother about it. And there is a day column, a review day column that only a start of the month, I believe, okay, and year. And apart from that, there is not much. There are 3 columns that somehow give you an explanation or about a feeling about the coffee you are reviewing. You have latitude and longitude for mapping. And then you have the origin where the coffee is grown and who people receive that coffee and roasted. So my screen is a little bit can see better now, Luis. We have the name of the brand. We have the roaster, that's the company roasting the coffee, the type of roast, the country or location where they are roasting or preparing the coffee, latitude and longitude, the origin. And then we have the price per 100 grams. Okay, it's going to tell you what coffee are more expensive and less expensive. And then you can actually try to put together why. Is that because of the ingredient used in the coffee? Is because, I don't know. I think Luis knows about coffee more than me. What I find very interesting is that all the coffee have everything but coffee. I was laughing a bit before. So you have dark chocolate, tangerine zest, star jasmine, maple syrup, and I just want a coffee. Give me a coffee, please. Forget about the else. But the data set is very simple. We actually did this on purpose. We want you to use your imagination. The data set is not going to give you much. We want you to think about what can I do with this data set. Everybody has gone for the normal stuff, sentiment analysis. But to do a proper sentiment analysis, we don't have the tool for it. Okay, you have to have premium capacity, blah, 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 to do a proper sentiment analysis in Power BI service. So you need to think and come up with idea. You need to get out of the box, okay, and think about, okay, what can I do? Some ideas. You got coffee prices per 100 grams. You can get another column and say, okay, high prices, medium prices, low prices, or something like that. Okay? And then we are going to see how Aivis using ZoomCharts can actually, you can bring alive the report. As I told you, there is a day column. Okay? You can get a calendar table, and you only need just the calendar table with the day, year, and maybe the month or quarters, and you can expand per quarter or per month. So that is how simple the data set it is. Now let me go to creating the report, and I'm going to talk about color palette, because I'm sure that everybody is thinking, well, coffee, I go for coffee colors, yes? But everybody thinking the same. So everybody's going to bring to me a coffee color report. You need to think about that and say, okay, everybody's going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try, it's going to be coffee, but I had to change how I look at coffee in colors. Okay, I'm trying to be a different color palette on this occasion, or presentation in the bars and whatever to do. So not everybody have the same report. Remember, I don't know if you remember to play this game at home with the family, where you have a paper and you have cities, fruit, countries, continent, and somebody tell you that with a B, no? And you have to start saying country with a B, and everybody start thinking about with a country with a B until somebody get to a normal one, Bali. But everybody knows Bali. You need to come with something else that is not Bali to make the 30 point or 40 point if you are the only one with that answer, okay? So remember, it's about thinking out of the box. It is about how to be creative without being brown coffee chocolate, okay? And how I can, with that information, use visuals, and I'm talking about normal visual. Aivis is going to show you in a minute. Line chart, column chart, bar chart to represent some of the data, okay, we have in the data set. This time, it's about you thinking about out of the box, okay? What can I do? How can I do something about that? Because that's your client telling you, yes, that's what we have, that is my company, that's what we do. We need some data and some reporting, okay? And for you guys to actually come out and deliver some reports. Remember, the color palette, very important. Everybody is going to do a coffee brown palette, shop around and see what you can do. That's for me, Aivis. Let me start sharing. That was me, very quickly.
All right. No pressure. Just everything on me now, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, one thing you guys gonna notice is, and I do this almost every single time, right? I showcase you what I've been trying to build. And the reason why I sometimes leave the reports like this, right? Because I could go ahead and play around with the design things a bit more. I could, for example, round the edges of things and so forth. this is how usually I go through report building as well. I don't have the layout straight away, but I start to think about the data set, what is it, and what I need to calculate, for example. So I go through the columns and I try to distinguish, first of all, if there is some outliers. So what I typically like to do is, first of all, I always go to Power Query. So whenever I bring in a source of data, you know how you have load and transform, right? When you bring in new data source, I'll be honest, maybe 1% of the time I actually click on load because I never trust the original data source. I just don't do it because you never know what.
I never do.
Exactly, right?
100% transform.
So, and the reason why I do this is because I try to see if there's something already that I can try to kind of eliminate or alleviate straight away. And one of the things that stood out for me in this sample is, okay, brand name, remember, under view, you can enable this column quality, which is just a quick quality check to see how does the column, what type of values does the column consist of. It gives you valid, error, or empty. Three main things you need to understand, right? Whether your values are okay, whether you get some errors, whether you have a lot of empty values there. And then you try to understand, okay, is this normal behavior? Is it an expected result that there's nothing in it, or it's an abnormality? So what I have here, for example, is type of roast. I mean, if you're roasting coffee, you probably do it with some sort of type, right? Well, we can see that we have, okay, it's less than 1%. There's actually only 5 rows of data which don't have any specific roast type, but there are some. So what I typically like to do is, first of all, I always try to double check if this is something that's expected, right? And we can see, okay, in the full data set, there's actually 12 different rows. They don't have a type of roast. So I take a look at it and I say, okay, maybe there's some outliers or, some error data or something. But I look at it and say, okay, there's a roaster. Okay, got it. There's brand names. Everything else is here. Everything seems good, which just means that for whatever reason, these ones don't have anything specified. And with empty rows or null values, the tricky part is you need to understand how that is going to affect your visuals as well. So for example, if you input this sort of value into a table, you might have a situation where it's going to give you the row, which doesn't have any value, but you have something on the other side of it. And in other cases, you might completely ignore it because you don't have any specific value within it. So what I typically do in these sort of situations, like I said, I double check, try to understand if this is something that's done intentional or if it's just, a misunderstanding or it's a human error, happens as well. So what I do is usually I filter it out. I try to understand it. For example, in this case, it seems like nobody specified what type of roast. So instead of just giving users, a column or a table or whatever I'm going to be using this type of data, I don't want to give them null, right? Null just means nothing. So what I typically do is I just replace these sort of values. So null is actually going to be not specified. It's a small little change, but trust me, your users at least now understand, okay, somebody just didn't specify a roast, right? Null, you don't know what happened. You're missing data or what's the situation there. But always try to understand if this is something that you need to do. In some cases, I know for customers as well, and Federico probably has done this as well for customers. In some cases, we utilize the null basically as a troubleshooting mechanism to see if something in the data set has not been qualified, because that's also one way on how you can find outliers. In this case, it's a challenge. There's going to be things that you have to figure out how to do. So this is one of those things that I typically do and just get it back there. Whenever you filter out rows, remember, delete the steps where you filter out things. Otherwise, you're going to pass out the data set on the other side and you're going to have only 12 rows of data.
No. Yeah, I use the same technique. I put no applicable and A, but yes, in that case, it's good to actually do that.
So just, like I said, enhance the data set, make it more presentable. Like Alexander, for example, mentioned, Canada drinks the most coffee. Well, if you have that information, if you actually have information about every single country in the world, the coffee consumption, why not enhance the data set? Find the countries that you have in this particular data set and see, for example, which of these countries boasts the most unique brands, for example, and how much is the consumption for that specific country. So you can always figure out things to do on top of that. Few other things that I noticed here. And this is something that, like I said, a few ideas that I want to give to you, but I'm not going to tell you how to do that. So if you look at these 3 columns, right? The short description, the aroma, and the mouthfeel. So those are 3 different properties on how you could describe a coffee. And one of the challenges, and this is actually something we've done as well from ZoomCharts side, when we were looking for the report developer, this was one of the exercises that we gave to them. You have basically a column with a lot of different properties, right? We can see that there's lemon blossom, roasted cacao, date, rice, candy, and so forth. What we wanted to give or get as an end result is, I want the user to be able to have a slicer, for example, where he can choose specifically individual aroma properties. For example, I don't know, lemon blossom, right? We can see this actually is in multiple rows. We can find it here, we can find it right here. So I want to be able to just select lemon blossom and see which roasts have this specific aroma. And you can do this as well for the mouthfeel, you can do this for the product description, and it gives the user a way to just, for example, define the properties for coffees that he's looking for. Then with the rest of the data set, we have the price point, for example, like Federico already mentioned. So you can look at the price point and see, okay, for example, for coffee that has the aroma of lemon blossom, does it differentiate from year to year? Is it going upwards, downwards? What's the trend with that particular price point, right? So take that into account as well. And trust me, this is not as difficult as you would think. It's just a matter of understanding how to do it and how to control this. So it's one thing that I would recommend you play around with it, right? Worst case scenario, you just end up not doing it. Okay, fine. Keep it as a challenge for yourself. Trust me, the amount of things that over time I wasn't able to do initially, but now when I look at it, it's like, oh my God, it was just that simple, right? It's because you get more knowledge with different challenges, with different data sets. And this is also one of the reasons why I always recommend people, especially who are trying to work with one specific type of data, to look at these sort of challenges, because it allows you to see different challenges you're gonna face in the data engineering world. So just think about that, right? Play around with these, see what you can do with it. If not, then worst case scenario, you can always use a word cloud.
Oh no, don't. Please, terrible, terrible chat. There is a question here in a millisecond. Dice Manuel de la Rosa, maximum 2 pages. Is it okay to take the second page or at least half of it to share inside? It is your report. You had 2 pages, but you don't really have 2 pages, okay? You have to present to me on the post you put on the group 2 pages. But what you produce for people to check online on your portfolio can have 2 or 3 pages. And whatever you send to Aivis, via ZoomChart is a full report. It can have, Emmanuel, more than 2 pages. You also can do an overlay with those insights, or you can actually put the insights on the post, okay?
So this is just one of the examples, right? For example, you might have 2 pages, which are the 2 main pages. But for example, you can see you can utilize visual switches where, for example, you focus on one value or the other. And this just means that you're not creating a new physical page. You're just changing the data that's within them. You can also use principles of visual switches where you physically change one way to another. You can see the person here creating this one created also a summary page. So there are ways on how you can always work around these sort of limitations. The main idea is there are 2 primary pages. You can add additional insights, you can add informational overlays, you can add navigation screens and so forth. You can use report page tooltips, you can use drill through functionality and so forth. So those are not considered to be additional pages. Pages which are the main factors, those are taken into consideration. So that's just one thing. But yeah, think about the data, look at it, see if there's any other outliers, see if you can do anything extra on top of it. So what I'm going to do is quickly just close and apply. And then I'm going to go back to the sample. So a few things like you see here, for example, I just wanted to see, okay, how many unique values are there? And this might seem like, okay, sure, I could just add all of these. You know why I'm doing this? because there are certain columns which I want to identify. For example, I wanted to see, okay, how many countries do we have in total? Okay, we have 11. Okay, how many origins we have? Okay, how many brand names we have? How many roasters? The reason why these are so important for me is because when you first initially take a look at one of the columns, let's say the same roaster, right? It might seem like there's a lot of values, but you really don't know how many. And these quick measures allow you to understand how many unique values you have within them. So what this can quickly tell me, for example, if I wanted to use the roaster, for example, as a legend item, which allows me to split by subcategory, you would not do that with almost 300 items. Don't do that, especially with 1000. So don't use brand name as a legend item, right? It allows you to quickly understand, okay, which properties could I potentially use as something different? So for example, country is 11. I'd say it's getting close to the top, which I would allow normally, but okay, you can use that. There's 27 origins. For this one, there's a specific use case that I want you to think about as well. But for example, 27, in a normal situation, that's a bit of an overkill. There's too many colors. There's going to be too much of a split. There's going to be too many colors. So it might become a little bit too much for a user to understand, right? And the way I do it is there couldn't be a more simple measure. For example, types of roast, right? I'm going to make a number of types. The only thing I do is, let me just make this a little bit bigger. The only thing I do, I just create distinct count for types of roast. I make a card. I don't worry about its perfect position or anything like that. The reason for that is because of number of roasters. The wrong card. Where's my new measure? Types. That's the one. 6. Okay. So we only have 6 different unique types. This now tells me that, hey, I could actually use types as one of the splits. And that's what I'm doing here on the map visual. I have the map visual, which shows me the number of roasters in each particular country, but I'm using the donut chart on top of it to see it by the type of roast. So for example, if I select one of it, you can see that filters out just one particular roasting type. Now I can see, okay, there's actually 26 different origins. There's 568 unique brand names. So I play around with these variations or cases to try to understand how many unique possibilities this creates. And the main reason why I'm telling you about this is I can't emphasize enough on the fact of how many times me and Federico both have told you to play around with the data. Play around with your slicers, see how it affects different visuals, and think about how it's going to look like. For example, the reason I want at one point emphasize this number of origins, right? Why I wanted to bring your attention to it is because of this. So for example, currently, you're looking at a very simple chart. Right? You're looking at a timeline visual where I'm only using basically the year and the month, and I'm using the average price per 100 grams of coffee. You can see that as well here in the legend item. All right, cool. So that tells me the overall situation or the overall trend for the coffee price. I could, of course, enhance this and create, for example, another series which would showcase me the difference between this and previous year. And I can focus on the differences as well. I can switch between them. But the one thing I wanted to kind of play around here, or the idea that I wanted to play around on, is this one. We have 27 different origins in total. That's a lot. Now, if I use origins as a legend field, I think you can agree with me that this looks bad, right? From a data visualization standpoint, this looks bad. There's a lot of different lines. You can't really read it. It's not really telling you anything. It's not usable. If I switch this to a monthly view, it's even worse. This is just a sea of markers, right? It doesn't tell me anything. But if you utilize other visuals on your page, I can create a scenario like this, where, for example, here I also have, based on the average price and based on the average rating, I'm showcasing different origins split down by the roasters. So what I allow the user to do is, for example, hey, I'm actually want to look at these 4. So I create a selection, and you can see the timeline for these 4 particular elements. So I can investigate it further and try to understand, okay, how it's actually comparing to each other. I can see, okay, 4 of them, yeah, there's just a bit too much information. Okay, fine. I want to compare this versus this. Oh, happens to the best of us where you misclick. So we can see, for example, that the blue origin actually has a lot of historic value in it, right? So it's been here for a lot longer. Whereas the outlier, which has a high rating and a very high price, only has 2 different data points.
It's a new coffee.
Exactly. It's a new coffee. And based on what we have here, it seems like, okay, maybe it's not the most popular because we don't have anything afterwards. Or maybe it's using the same price still. So those are a lot of things which you as a developer are going to notice and start to think about, which you didn't even think about initially, right? Because like I said, my first thought process here would be, okay, what happened here? Is it discontinued, no longer used? Does it use the same price point? Do it just don't have any more data? Should I consider that if there's nothing following afterwards, it's the same point, just rinse and repeat? There's a lot of ways on how you can visualize it. But like I said, the reason why I'm showing this to you is think outside the box. And if you show me this as the default visual, I would probably say, yeah, this is a no-go. This doesn't tell you anything. Okay, it tells you one thing. There's one green outlier, but it doesn't really tell you anything else. So starting off with a visual like this probably makes more sense. But remember, you have a lot of built-in functionality, not just from ZoomCharts, but from Power BI in general. So you can utilize, for example, in other cases, we've shown you how to do this, but you can easily Google it as well, field parameters, where you, for example, choose whether something is being used in the legend field or, for example, nothing is being used in the legend field. So that allows the user to suddenly split between 2 different variations of the visuals. Don't know how to use the field parameter? Fine. Create 2 instances of the charts and use bookmarks. In one bookmark, say that you're showing one visual. On the other bookmark, you're showing the other visual. So there's a lot of ways on how you can think about it, right? What else? The scatter plot. Don't be afraid to use a scatter plot. I know it's not the easiest visual, especially if you're new to data visualization. This is not something you do on your first day. There are going to be certain people who are going to be doing this from day one, but not everybody. Most of you are going to be familiar with, like I call them, the most common types of charts: columns, lines, areas, donuts, tables, matrices, and cards. That's what a lot of reports are going to have. And then there's always going to be some specific visuals, the map visuals, scatter plots, network type of visuals. Those are nuanced visuals for specific use cases. So think about your strengths, think about what you want to challenge yourself for in this one, and see what new ideas or what new kind of combinations of charts you can up with. So in this one, for example, like I said, right, I'm splitting based on origin and roasters. So at any point of time, if I want to focus on Ecuador as one of the origins for the coffee, I can click on it, I can drill down and see, okay, how are different companies that roast coffee from this particular country comparing to each other. I can zoom out, I can zoom in, I can compare all of them, or I can focus on these 4. The reason for these sort of behaviors is because I think you're going to agree that if we're looking at it like this, you see 3 points, right? Well, in reality, there's actually 4, but they're very close to each other. So the zooming capabilities help you out with finding the actual values. One way on how you could also tackle this would be if you go ahead with the data points and say that there's going to be transparency to your nodes, and you add some outlines. Because now it's a lot easier for me to notice that there's some overlap happening. Play around with different visual setups. Don't be afraid to do it. Trust me, it's easy for me to say, yeah, I get it. I've created thousands of reports, but I started off exactly in the same position as you did. I was learning data visuals, I was learning different mechanisms, I was learning different approaches on how things could be visualized.
Can I ask a question, Aivis?
Of course.
Okay, can we, in the map, if I use a filter by country of origin, and in the map I have country origin and the roaster, and I filter, will tell me how many countries this coffee is. Okay, let me refresh it again. I got different country of origin. Think about Kenya. And in the other side, I got the people buying the coffee, roasting the coffee, the country where the coffee are being roasted. So I would like to know how many countries Kenya sell coffee to?
Sure. So essentially, you would just put the roaster latitude and longitude. Those are the two columns you have. That's going to give you the map itself. And if you have something like a slicer, or if you're doing it here, let's say country of origin is going to be where the roasters. So these are countries, these are roasters. You want to see
Well, they are
based on
countries.
origin.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you select an origin here, this filters out and showcases you all the roaster locations.
Okay.
So, and again, based on the zoom level, you can see, okay, all of them, all the four in this case are in US. The one thing about the map also that you can kind of take into account is that there's tooltip fields, right? And the way that the tooltip works, the way on how we built this is we wanted to give you a possibility to go through those values. So if you have information that is duplicated in multiple rows, or in this case, there's multiple entries for it, if you right click on a cluster, you can see you can actually move through each and every one of these. You might also just have a table somewhere here. So for example, let's say I'm gonna decrease the size of the timeline. I'm gonna add a table, which is gonna have what I had here, the roasters, brand names, and average rating, for example. So I'm gonna be adding roasters. I'm gonna be adding to the brand names. I'm gonna be adding the average price, and I'm gonna be adding the average. Where was it? Review. Whenever you need to find something fast, it just messes with you. Rating. It's right here. How did I miss it? I also miss sometimes. So this one's going to be an average. I'm going with basic aggregations. It's a lot better if you do this with calculations, because then you can control the outcome a lot better. But you could, for example, do this, right? So now I'm basically doing a combination of both of them. So I can select a particular country, I can filter out the map, and I can go through every single roaster that, has it. I can go based on either the price, I can go based on the rating. So one of the things that we always try to kind of recommend to you guys is think about the cross-chart filtering capabilities. You're building a report which allows the user to go through different dimensions and focus on different aspects. I know a lot of you are used to having this sort of approach for reports where you showcase this in, a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting, and basically you showcase different statuses. But think about a report that is the same report that you typically see, but in this one, you're actually allowed to ask and answer questions. So it's one of the things that I usually do. I think about, okay, what can the user typically ask, right? What might be his interest? It's ideal if you have target audience, because then you can just ask them, but you don't always have it. So you try to figure out and play around with these.
There is a question, Aivis.
Yep.
Okay, let me see. Gabriel Joffres asks about question number 1, is brand coffee or roasted? Question number 1 is about the most expensive coffee per 100 grams, and it has to be in roaster. I think the price we have been given in the price, this roaster sell the coffee to the public. That is my interpretation. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know if the importation price, it's no specification.
I mean, we can always double check. We can go to data dictionary. Name of the roaster, name of the blend. So I'm guessing the way on how we can always do this is if you want to be just 100% sure, right? Since the question is, what is the most expensive coffee? So it's a specific coffee. So I would just create a new column which concatenates both of these, just to avoid a situation where the same coffee name could be used for different roasters. So you have the concatenated version of it, and then based on that, you find the most expensive one.
Yeah. I think in roaster, Gabriel. And I can tell you the price and the name of the coffee by now, of the many times I have checked the dataset. $132 and something.
So play around with these.
Yeah,
There you go. Paradise Roaster. Mama
$132 entonces.
You were on spot on.
Oh yeah, I like my coffee, my beer. Sorry, I don't know. I don't like. I like coffee.
Yeah, just replace coffee with beer. That works just fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, see that this is one of the reasons. Like if you switch to roasters, you can see a lot of rows are not here because roasters are duplicate values in some cases. The blends are the unique ones. So if we go for brand names, for example, just the brand names, we can see it's 127. So this proves to you that there are duplicate values being shown here. So most likely the best approach would be combining the brand with the roaster to get all these unique combinations.
Yeah.
But
you can tell us a top 10 prices and bottom 10 prices. I remember about using your imagination, and I wanted to mention before when Aivis mentioned about the majors at the top. Before I start working on a report, I have 1 page or 2 pages of, I call them test pages, where I start throwing a lot of stuff in it. Okay, not only allow me to see some outline of something that is not normal, but it starts giving me ideas of what I can do. Okay, and I do that with cards. I do some table to check how it's working around. I might throw a couple of column over charts. I want to see how the information is painting on the canvas, as I call it. Okay, and from there I start making decisions. I never go straight to the report itself. There is quite a lot of validation and testing before we got into the report.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, that's why the sessions are for, right? We try to give them as much information as possible. But yeah, when you go through these, like one of the things you also have to understand is if you're going to be one of those people who can actually do it, I envy you because I cannot do this. If usually I have a lot of different questions, I try to understand if I have to answer them in a single page, if I can go with multiple pages, and then try to build a story with that. The other thing is if I have 10 different questions, what I usually like to do is first of all just answer all of them independently, so you know the values that you are looking for. And what I'm doing then afterwards, and I even do this on just every single question, so question 1, question 2, question 3, so forth, and I find the answer for it. So I know what I'm looking for. And then afterwards, once I have the answers to all those questions, I know how they look. I know what the values are that I'm looking for. I know what visuals that I'm supposed to be using for it. That is the moment when I try to put things together. That's one approach. For some people, different approaches work, where they go through all the questions and they see, okay, so I'm going to be looking at top and bottom values, for example. I'm going to be looking at which country. So this could be either a map or a column chart or a line chart, which coffee brand has the best worst average rating. So I'm going to have something that allows to compare brands. And you kind of try to build from that side of things. There's different approaches. There's not a single universal approach that works the best. You can see different report creators. You can see different YouTube channels, different content creators. They're going to tell you the same thing, right? For example, I do it like this. Somebody else is going to tell you this is my approach, and they are going to be completely different. There are going to be some similar things, of course, because at the end of the day, we're all taking best practices from each other and trying to, develop our skills as well. But every single one of us has a different approach of things and how you even learn. So for some of you, for example, need to see it. Some of you need to read it. Some of you need to physically do it yourself to just get it, memorized. So think about all those things as well.
There is another question, Maria.
Yep.
I'm not sure what you are referring to. She is mentioning about some of the characters in brand names seems to change when we load the data to Power BI. I'm not sure what you are referring to, so I posted my LinkedIn profile. You send me a message via LinkedIn, a private message with an example. I will check it out for you and come back to you with a reply as soon as possible.
Yeah. It might be, right? We're not perfect. We can also make mistakes, but we also want to understand why it's happening. Because in some cases, it might be just the encoding itself, right? One source is using one encoding, the Power BI is using a different one. Because when you're adding, I think it was for Excel as well, that whenever you are adding a file,
also check your prices, because sometimes you might have to change it to the locale of locale. You know, when you change the price to locale, so
yes.
I think there is a US data set. When we first, or somebody of my team put it on an Spanish Power BI, and the prices were like $1,300, 32. And when we changed to the locale, because I found that interesting and that is not right, and when we changed the locale to a US data set, everything came back to normal. So if you have prices that go about the $132 or $135, there is something wrong with that column. So make sure you check your data locale.
Yeah. A quick sample of this would be, let's say I make a duplicate of the price. And what I'm going to do is just replace the values. And I'm going to be replacing comma with a dot. Actually, it's not going to allow me to. Why? Fine, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to switch it to text, and then I'm going to be not errors, but replacing values. We're switching comma to a dot. There we go. And if I'm going to try to convert this now into a decimal number, I'm going to get errors.
Yeah.
It might be errors. In some cases, it might misrepresent the value and, consider that to be an extension of a decimal number. For example, in some cases, it might think that's an extension of a 1,000 separator. So what you do is, for example, if this would be you, right? You have the values, but you just want to physically tell Power BI that this is a decimal value. You right-click on a column, and you find the option of change type using locale. Then you wait for the pop-up window to show up. There we go. So you can see, for example, my local language is Latvian, right? So that's the data model that I'm using by default. So I know that I want to have this as a decimal number. And this is the most important part that I always tell people to look at. Read what it says. Sample input values. The keyword being input values. So you're not defining the model to which you're transferring the data to, but you're defining the model from which the data is coming from. So for example, in my case, a dot doesn't mean anything in Latvian, so that's why I'm returning an error, because we can't transfer this number directly. But if you're using a US standard, a dot is a decimal divider. So I would say that this is actually coming from English, United States. And you can see, okay, comma is a 1,000 separator, a dot is a decimal separator. So this is the input value that I have here. Yeah, looks about right. I click OK, and now suddenly Power BI can parse it.
Yep.
So you're defining the incoming value format. Trust me, before I knew change values, it was fun. Well, I was basically taking the copy, making a duplicate, replacing the values dots with commas, for example, and then changing. There's a lot of weird work people have done.
That is part of this data validation testing we do before we start anything we're talking about. That there are coffee that can cost you $1,000 per 100 grams. Yeah, probably. I think there is one that is very expensive. That is, you don't want to know how it is done because you will not drink it. But that was not the coffee I had with $1,000 price. So
Yep.
That told me there is something wrong. There is something wrong, and then I checked the locale and it worked. That's how we actually found out the problem. But that is testing a validation that you need to do. When you get a data set, you don't get it. You throw it on Power BI and start working on it. There is a lot of enhancing and transformation and checking and everything else.
So we have a question from Ali. So once you change the values, does it stick for future data? Yes, for this particular column. Because you changed the locale type for a column, not for the whole data set. So if there's new data coming in here, it's going to transfer it to using the locale settings, and it's going to be read properly. That's all going to be fine. But if there's going to be a new column, that is a completely different story. Yeah, for example, monthly data that is coming in European format to US Power BI. Yeah, if you change the locale, all the incoming data afterwards is, because remember, the great thing about Power Query is that there are steps on how this is being read. So before the data gets sent to the Power BI desktop itself, it goes through all these steps. So in my case, it would go through source, navigation, whatever I've done there. It comes to this step and it says, hey, I'm supposed to change the locale. I change the locale and then I send it to Power BI. And on Power BI desktop, everything's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm. About that, be careful. Sometimes we are talking about the column. It looks like it hasn't changed, but when you load it into Power BI, it will come back with the locale. But sometimes there is a little mistake, or I don't know what happened. You are looking in Power Query and it's still the same American format, but when you load it into Power BI, it can the European format. So remember.
The good thing about Power Query itself is, always remember that every single time you have these gears next to it, it means that you can actually just open up the menu where you change things. So in some cases, you don't necessarily, in some cases, you have to delete the step and do it again. In some cases, you can just open up here and see, okay, what I did here. I did this. Oh, no, actually, instead of English United States, I was supposed to be using English United Kingdom, right? So I don't have to delete it, change it again, apply a new logic. I just change the model itself. So gears means there was a pop-up window where you can change stuff. For example, where we changed the type. So this is probably one of the automatic. This is actually, one thing that, let's see if it happens again. So if I duplicate this one, it just duplicated. Okay. So one of the things that I usually recommend as well is whenever you're loading in a new data set, Power BI is going to try to the best of its ability define the type for each and every single one of the columns. I would say never trust it. It can do a great job, but usually when you have a lot of different column types, something is going to go wrong. So this is why, like I said, right, I always open up transform data and I just go through the columns. I do a quick quality check to make sure that it's correct data. An example of this, right? Let's say I'm going to go for something like countries long lat. The reason why I'm doing this is because I've done this before and I know it's going to be wrong. So you can see here, there's just countries, coordinates, and so forth. So I'm going to bring this into Power BI. I'm just going to copy the table, load it in, new query, and you can see source and change type. Oh, Power BI automatically detected the data type, right? Should be good. I mean, it's Microsoft, right? They know what they're doing. But the problem is that that's just an algorithm. And the algorithm went through these values, and knowing that my locality is Latvian, it told you, hey, this is probably not a decimal number. It's just an index, basically. So you can see the type for these columns is text. At least it's not getting me any errors, but that's not what this column represents. So just pay attention to these things and double check.
I actually have it disabled. I got the first header row disabled and the detect data type disabled. So I like to put my headers myself, and then my last step in any transformation is detect data type. So and do not do auto relationship when you load it and they create the relationship. I have that disabled too.
There's a lot of things you guys can change. Trust me, the more you're going to work with Power BI, the more you're going to notice that almost everything that is done automatically, once you get more advanced with it, you're going to disable all of it.
Okay, guys, we have 1 second, Aivis. We have the form online now. I am happy to share a Power BI book. with one of the people submitting the form. So a proper Power BI top of the book if you fill up the form.
Well, there you go. Can I participate?
Yes.
I mean,
yes,
I'll
we're
give
talking
it a rating.
about a pack book that will be sent to you by Pack himself or myself. Okay, we're talking about the good book, the one you normally buy in Amazon and cost you a fortune.
Oh, they cost you a lot.
Hurry up. The phone is appearing soon.
The offer ends in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the main thing about like what I wanted to say to you guys, and I think me and Federico talked about this in the beginning, don't always try to just go, step by step by what is requested from you. Try to challenge yourself. Think outside the box. Like Federico also mentioned, right, the color palette. Most of you are going to think about, I'm just going to do the coffee color palette. Sure, but, you kind of also want to stand out.
Yeah.
Don't go completely crazy with the colors. But
No, but there are little tricks that I always consider in my challenges when I was participating. I know everybody's gonna do that. If you're gonna do a Formula One, and you're gonna go to the Formula One website. You're gonna try to. You need to come out that because everybody is gonna do the same. Okay, and give you a twist. You go.
Sabina just mentioned as well. So in the form itself, it's always anonymous, so we don't ask for your emails or anything. But in this case, since there is a book on the line, please, guys, in one of the questions, just type in your email. So
I will actually find you. I will find you on LinkedIn. Don't worry, I find you on LinkedIn.
Okay.
If you don't want to give the email address, I understand that. I will find you.
Yeah, just at least give us name so we know who is the winner, right?
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be anonymous.
Yeah, I didn't know about that, the form. So, but hey, a free book, 1 hour.
All right, guys.
Ahmad Belal is there. Guys, thank you. As I told you, we only have an hour permission from the boss, Sabine. And thank you for coming and stay with us for another hour. Thank you to Aivis, fantastic presentation
and
insight. That's for me, Aivis. Say goodbye to these nice people.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and have an amazing day.